All right, recording?
Recording has started.
All right. Okay, so I'll call the meeting to order, and will the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Davis.
Present.
Councilmember Keel. Councilmember Kerr.
Present.
Councilmember Parmet. Here. Councilmember Sullivan.
Here.
Councilmember Vista.
Present.
Mayor Riley.
Here.
There are 6 members present.
All right. Yes.
I talked to him last week,
Who? Lindsay?
Scott Price.
I was thinking there was a meeting, and then I just pulled this up and read on it.
If there's no objection, we'll bypass the first item, the discussion with the water district director, and if he comes, we will then go back and after completion of whether item we're talking, and bring him on. Is that okay with everybody?
Yep.
All right. So the next item is discussion of town financials.
And I will take this one. I've talked to our accountants. So as usual, we're bringing in more than expecting and spending less than expected. There are a few issues that I'd like to go over, might be a little confusing. On the first page, we see due to Summit County sales tax advance is listed at $200,000. That's because of the modified accrual system we use. So our July advance was not figured into this financial yet, even though we actually have the money in now and continue to owe $400,000 outstanding to the county. But the way the accrual system, Marchetti doesn't enter that in as a liability until we get the actual tax reports, which we have not gotten from the county yet for the July payment. And that later on you'll see under fund equity that 200,000, same sort of thing. It's actually 400,000 that we will owe to the county come this fall. There was, the mayor had one minor question as we get down. Well, any questions on just the general high-level financial reports? So we're still sitting at around $1 million in our various accounts.
I do. I think I know what it is. On the sales tax receivable, negative 22,385.
That has to do with why we get May. So that has to do with, I'm not sure why it was 22,385. Forgot to ask that question, but it has to do with the fact that we're bringing in less tax money than the 200,000.
And that's really probably something that needs to clean up, because the tax receivable should not be based at all on the 200,000 that we're repaying.
No. So I think this has to do with our May tax receivable, which technically hasn't shown up yet, but I will clear that up and get a good answer to it. But it does have to do with the receiving less than $200,000.
That was what I assumed, but I wanted to verify.
The mayor had a question later on the third page. There was a $695 bank and miscellaneous fees. 30 of that is bank fees. The rest were items that were miscoded. Safety vests that we bought for the town employees when we're out, and planning commission supplies, which actually have already been now correctly coded to the proper sections. Everything else, like I said, we're really close to the expected numbers on most things. Those issues where we're not, and the same month after month. Town manager was hired later than expected, so town manager salary doesn't coincide with expected budget. However, we have extra payments to consultant in different parts for Gary's pay. Issues like that. Town attorney costs are still way above what was projected. But I think what was projected, well, we get value out of it, let's put it that way. We appreciate our town attorney very much. Everything else is pretty much in line with how it's been in previous months. Any particular questions, any questions about any specific items? We're working on, with the accountants, on recoding some of the line items, redoing some of the line items now that we're 5 months into the town. They're getting a better grasp on where we need to put our items, how we need to classify items. We won't change the bottom lines anymore.
Any questions? Any concerns? All right, next item is legislative update. And should I just go straight to the town attorney?
We sure should.
So in the packet for the work session is a legislative update from the 2024 session. There is a summary that was put together, and then also CML's laws enacted publication. The summary is for bills that could be applicable to the town of Keystone, either related to work that you're doing, or maybe things that your residents might know about, want to know about. And we're particularly speaking about, residents wanting to know, or property owners wanting to know are the property tax questions and property tax issues. So I will go through this. I'm probably not going to touch on every single one, and I'll do a high-level overview, and please let me know if you have any questions. On the first bill related to prohibiting residential occupancy limits, I have been wanting to talk with Lindsay about this, and I haven't, so I was hoping he was going to be here, but I don't believe that there's anything in the Summit County Land Development Code which has occupancy limits for residential structures. I don't believe that exists. If it did, then we would want to make some amendments to the code to remove those occupancy limits. This is legislation that again relates to the housing issues and the way of the state to try to help housing problems. The next one that I'm going to touch on is HB 241175, which is the rights to property for affordable housing, and this is essentially, it grants local governments a right of first refusal or a right of first offer related to certain types of multifamily rental properties. And essentially what this is again, this is a housing bill that allows local governments to purchase properties that will be used for affordable housing. It's a pretty lengthy bill, and there's quite a detailed process that's laid out in the bill as to how it all works. One of the questions that I had is how is this communicated? How do when these sales are happening, how does a local government find out? And how does the property owner provide notice to the local government that their property is going to be sold? I don't know the answer to that question.
Well, especially when it said it could be prior to even listing.
Yes, the first offer. Yeah.
But
And there's a notice that has to be provided by the property owner in that situation to the local government. I'm not sure how that property owner would know of that responsibility.
but it only applies to multifamilies that are more than 15 units and less than 100.
Yes, that particular
So
one.
Keystone, if you think about Keystone, we really have one property, I believe, that would probably qualify, and that would be the Alpine Inn.
That was the question.
All the HOAs aren't sold in bulk like that,
Okay.
so you wouldn't, so I don't know if anything else.
Yeah.
Potentially, if the Hyatt Inn were to be, but it's probably more than 100 units. The Hyatt Inn potentially could be, when Kindred's, well, I think they have 115 and 95 condos, and they'd be more than 100. So there's just not a lot that applies here. When you get to Silverthorne and Dillon, they have a lot of those motels
Yeah.
that falls into. Or if you had where it would also apply would be if you had a light tech unit that was going off of the light tech restrictions and the owner was selling. In many cases, that would be more than 15 and less than 100. And I know Silverthorne has that issue there.
Would that apply to wintergreen? Isn't there a portion of wintergreen that'll convert at some point?
The 45 units in Wintergreen, and I don't know, probably have something in about 25 years.
Oh, it's 25 years.
Yeah, it's a long time. John, light tech was restriction ends in what, 25 years, 25 years?
I think it's 30.
30 years.
Watch it, whoa.
Yeah.
Well, I don't like when the window opens, just move the light here.
That's why I thought they kept falling on me this year.
So that was the right of first offer. There is a right of first refusal, and that applies to multifamily residential or mixed-use rental properties consisting of not less than 5 units of existing affordable housing. So that's the right of first refusal.
And again, from,
Not much.
I don't think the question Keystone will even fall from. If you think about it.
Okay.
And by the way, the Alpine Inn is for sale.
I know, I've been getting freaked out calls. So I think it's something we need to talk about zoning and what that means. Because I don't know the answer that way, so, or exactly.
Is the
Oh,
Alpine Inn right along here?
yeah, it's,
Or over by Razor.
yeah,
I believe it's 3 weeks.
3 piece, it's 3 piece. So and I'm not sure what the classification, but it's authorized for, I don't know, you'd have to have lived in the zone.
You're freaked out about height, density, all sorts of
You'd
stuff.
have to ask Lindsay the question of. And with that,
So the next one is HB 24-1266, which is local government relocation. And that is essentially relocating utility and public rights of way. I assume to put it in a preferable location. I haven't delved into that one too much, but if that's something that may be a benefit to the town, we can look at that in more detail. I'm not going to touch on HB 24-1283, which is municipal campaign finance complaints. The Uniform Local Massage Facilities Regulation, which is 1371. I'm not sure that that's applicable in Keystone. I did touch base with Lindsay about it. And I'll have to circle back with him on it, but essentially that requires background checks for individuals that work in massage facilities. And we can work with the county. If the county is imposing something, we can work with them. So there is a background check.
Well, Central there, Keystone responded.
Yeah, that's one thing he had mentioned.
Lindsay's here, if you want to ask Lindsay a question about it. Oh, here.
No, I'll send an email set up like
All
that.
right.
Send a big one.
He knows that we'll talk with this guy.
Yeah, come on, Jessica, come on for it.
So the Three Peaks is on the market, the hotel at Razor Drive. And is there
Yes.
any way we can figure out exactly what that property is zoned for? So worst case
Yeah.
scenario, like height and density
I
and
have all that
use?
readily available.
Awesome. I was thinking, I expect you to give us a lecture today.
You failed. Did it just about the use?
It's actually zoned Arapahoe PD. Yeah. It was done in about 96. I don't have the development regulations directly in front of me, but the answer is, it is readily available. So tell me what you would like.
All right, go ahead.
Okay, so then, next one, which you guys have all heard about, is HB 24-1454, and that's the grace period for non-compliance with digital accessibility. I can tell you that the town staff is on top of this, so Keystone's in good shape.
We submitted all the required submissions in July.
There's nothing that needs to be submitted, you just have to have a progress report that is available and posted on the website, which you do. Yeah. Let's see, what's the next one? So there's a couple of property tax bills. The next one that's applicable to Keystone specifically is Senate Bill 24-131, prohibiting carrying firearms in sensitive spaces. And here, the state has enacted legislation that in certain areas, so it's where your governing body meets and where the office of your chief executive is, in courthouses, it's unlawful for somebody to bring in a loaded or unloaded firearm, and that includes open carry and concealed carry. So this is a big change in state law. It's a class 1 misdemeanor. The law does provide for local governments to opt out if that is an interest. The local government has to pass a law to opt out.
So based on that law, we have firearms restrictions in the town hall.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah. No one. So this was something we had discussed previously related to the employee handbook. So now everybody, employees included, are prohibited from bringing concealed carry weapons into the building.
If we wanted to change that to no firearms.
Yeah, there are municipalities that are adopting ordinances to opt out.
And so is that already passed or is that?
It's effective July 1.
Gotcha.
So it's effective now. It's interesting because the state legislature didn't put in a requirement for signage. So you don't have to put any signs up.
Should we do that?
I mean, that's a question. If, at one point, if you had decided to pass a rule that you were prohibiting open carry, there is a state law that provides that you have to put a sign up for that, for open carry.
This restricts both open and concealed.
And it's a state law. So the other provision was if the local government restricts open carry, then you need to put a sign up.
So as it is right now, it's illegal, but there's no sign, so nobody knows, but if we passed a law, that could be legal and still nobody would know.
Yeah. Well, you couldn't, So you can pass a rule related to open carry, and then you have to put a sign up that says, open carry is prohibited. It used to be that if you had concealed carry, then you had to have what's the word? The scanning, the security scanning, yeah, magnetometer. And now it's that the legislature is deciding that they don't want any guns in these sensitive spaces, open or concealed. Giving the local government an option to opt out.
So doing nothing, we're opted in this provision.
Right. But should we post a sign?
Mr. Town Manager, what do you think?
I don't think we should opt out.
No. Should we post a sign?
We probably,
I think it's a good idea to post a
Yeah.
sign. I mean, if you don't want to opt out and you want the law to apply, I think people should know about it.
how does that, I get, yeah, that's my question. How is the impact on, we're just leasing apartment building?
Does that only like apply to the offices or
It
there,
probably
or maybe
applies.
mobile signs?
I would have to look at the lease, but if the lease says that we have to comply with all laws, then I think it applies.
Well, so we might have to pay for multiple signs, or, I'm just being matter of fact, we have no idea if someone's concealed carry because it's concealed and the malactor isn't going to follow the rules anyway.
Well, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, we can just say.
Yeah, I suspect we're really leasing the offices and the meeting rooms. We're not leasing the hallway or the break area.
No.
So in our case, it sounds like you could restrict carry into the offices and the meeting room here, but you could not restrict it in the hallway because that's private property that we don't control.
Well, but the way the legislation is written is that it applies to buildings where these meetings are held, or where the office of the chief executive is.
So you say it's a whole building, regardless.
I think there's an argument, yes, that it's the whole building. I mean, one question would be, does the landlord or,
Care.
yeah, then maybe they don't care.
Yeah,
Maybe they would be for it.
Is there any reason why we don't want to post a sign? I don't know if I should ask that question if somebody doesn't want to answer it, but.
Only if it's an issue with,
One of their tenants.
With the landlord.
Yeah, so maybe we should.
I
make an
suggest
effort
we
to
talk to
ask.
the landlord, and I think the consensus is we want to post a sign if the landlord's fine.
Yeah,
Is that correct?
yeah, that's the consensus. That's what I heard.
If we're not opting out, we need a sign.
Okay, that's consensus.
Okay, so then the next one is SB 24-174, and this is another housing bill. And this puts on local governments requirements to do housing needs assessments. The first housing needs assessment needs to be done by December 31, 2026, and then every 6 years after that. And it is for, and then the other thing is that by January 1 of 2028, local governments with a population of at least 5,000 or has a population of 1,000 or more and participated in a regional housing needs assessment or is a rural resort community. I haven't looked at whether Keystone is in a rural resort community, but I suspect
Over
yes.
1,000 or more.
Right. Well, it's either 5,000 or 1,000 or more and in a rural resort community. Has to do a housing action plan. So these are all going to be requirements that Keystone will need to meet. For sure, the housing needs assessment by December 31 of 2026. And DOLA, the Department of Local Affairs, is going to be taking a significant role in these housing needs assessments. They're going to be putting together plans on how to accomplish these. There's reporting obligations, and the DOLA is also going to work on developing strategies for housing affordability and guidance for housing action plans. So there's a lot of visibility related to housing.
But if I'm correct, Mr. Town Manager, that we're doing the housing needs assessment as part of the comprehensive plan?
Yes, we are.
That'll be part of the requirements. It'll be needed anyway to do that portion of the comp plan.
So that's it really related to Keystone. The other one's property tax questions. But again, here, the constituents might be interested in that.
I would expect the county to play in the property tax question and potentially give tax relief to locals potentially in that area or need restricted housing. You agree, John?
I would think so. However,
We don't know.
I don't want to put words in the commissioner's mouth.
I know this is something that Commissioner Pogue was pushing for. All right. Any other questions for Jennifer? All right. Next item is ballot questions, Mr. Town Manager.
Okay, I am going to let our town attorney start out with this, and then we'll have a continuation of the discussion with polling questions, which is the table setting I put out, and Councilmember Kerr, I emailed you the table setting document.
So in the packet, this is council provided direction at the last.
Councilmember Kerr, did you hear? Great.
So at the last meeting on July 9th, there was direction that was given to draft ballot language for both a debrucing question and a lodging tax question. So in the packet, there's both of those two ballot questions, draft language. There is a lot of flexibility with the debrucing question. This is really not, Tabor doesn't provide the specifics as to the debrucing question, so it can be reworked. Related to the lodging tax question, there are specific requirements spelled out in Tabor. So pretty much the first couple of lines of that question are required by Tabor. So happy to talk further about each of these and.
Councilmember, this
I don't have a good background in what can and cannot be included in a ballot sense.
could you keep your
Oh,
mic?
sorry. I'm not well versed in how to write ballot text. However, I'm wondering, is there any way we could make an allusion to keeping grant money in this? So yeah, I mean, that's not controversial. That's just a fact, right?
Would that be in the ballot issue, or would that be in the discussion issue that goes with it?
It can be in either. We can put it in the ballot language. I mean, we can call out all of the revenue that we get that we're speaking to, that this goes to. Or the way that it's drafted, it just says to the revenue, all revenue.
Yeah, I don't think we would want to limit it just to the revenue from grants.
No, I'm not saying limit it, I'm saying identify it so people have an idea if they don't read the discussion points, why this is so vital.
Yeah,
Because
no,
not everybody educates themselves.
so the question, I think, really is, is there a way we can word the language that addresses that, but doesn't limit the revenue streams that it's applying to?
Yes. And I believe the previous language that I had provided was written that way, to be more explicit as to all types of revenue that are included. So we can.
But we don't want to limit it to just a certain limit. In other words, in the future, if we get a lodging tax or if we get a lift ticket tax, we don't want to limit total revenue to tax to go to another de-bruising effort to add that in. I just want to make sure that we don't put us into a hole that causes that.
And where the change would be made is, depending on what the direction is it's the third line in that question where it says, and spend the full amount of all revenue collected from all sources. It would be all revenue collected from, and then, but all of the sources would be listed.
But we don't have, some of those sources don't exist yet.
Well, the types.
Can we say including but not limited to?
Can you say
Yeah, we can
including?
say that.
Yeah.
We can say that.
And that's better than,
Yeah, I would hate to put like property tax in there,
Yeah.
yeah.
I see.
even though we need it, because 25, 30 years from now, who knows what.
Right.
Okay.
Does everyone agree with putting something
Yes.
like included but not limited to?
Yes.
And just to be clear, you meant even though we don't currently need it, but who knows in 30 years?
Yes.
And did that work?
It wasn't one of the ones they gave.
It wasn't. Those work.
Question.
Yes, Councilman Sullivan.
Just from a practical perspective, I saw the January 1 date for the lodging tax implementation. And I know it's been expressed out there that a lot of people book in advance and they booked without it already. And yeah, how does something like that, from a practical perspective, work?
I'll let the town manager answer that.
I'll rely heavily on our attorney to correct me where I'm wrong here, but taxes are due at time of delivery of service are good. So regardless of when you ordered something or booked a place, you pay the taxes based on when you get there. So if someone booked ahead of time and that tax wasn't included in their overall price, there'll have to be an ancillary billing or the homeowner would eat it. And, this is the way every new tax has impacts like this. There's always going to be a situation where something was ordered or booked before a tax was imposed in the interim, and that tax is owed. It would be a logistical nightmare to not set a date when taxes are due, but set it based on an arbitrary. It is arbitrary as far as delivery of services, but when it's booked or ordered.
And the date for this is November election, possibly?
Yes.
So they would have a month and a half or so
Right.
notice.
And one way, for instance, the way I operate my short-term rental is a large deposit is due at the time of booking, and the remainder is due a week before the actual stay occurs. So
Councilmember Burnett.
One presumes that this is not the first time this has ever happened in the world of Vrbo and Airbnb, and they probably have a button they press that simply updates things.
Councilmember Liston.
Would it be possible through the system that we're implementing to send out a notice to hosts, just saying this is a potential, perhaps they could consider putting this in their posts? Or, I mean, a lot of people don't start looking for the holidays maybe until this fall. So perhaps there's a window where they could say there's a potential ballot measure that could increase taxes, full disclosure. I mean, perhaps we could send a notice to the host once we've decided if this is going to be a ballot issue, just to remove lack of communication and give them the option of notifying potential bookings.
I think you mentioned it in the listing.
Yeah,
There may be,
it's not rocket science.
yeah, if this passes, if your bookings pass this point, there'll be a 2%.
Additional,
Yeah,
I don't know.
because that's what the hotels want to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In fact, in many cases, the hotels or large management companies, they actually operate more like the town manager talked about, is they get a large deposit, the amount, the balance is due upon arrival, and it's, or just prior to arrival, and then if there's an adjustment in taxes, the adjustment's made.
But we could be proactive
Oh,
and say, hey, hosts,
Yeah.
we've heard this concern, have you considered this?
that we want to make sure though that we're not having our host imposing and collecting the
Right.
tax.
Because they cannot collect it
Yeah,
in advance.
until it's imposed, but I just think communication is respectful.
Councilmember Davis.
Since we're renewing all the STR licenses, I think we have an opportunity to say this will be a ballot measure. And frankly, I think it's the owners of the STRs who, they can handle it with their rentals however they want to, but we've got the perfect opportunity to give them the information, and let's just hope they read it.
Yeah. But to go back to Councilmember Sullivan's statement, it would be a logistical nightmare to try to base it on time of booking rather than time of stay.
Other questions? That first ballot on the, well, I guess we were already on the second ballot. The three items that you have, the two bullets down there, law enforcement services, I thought we were talking about public safety versus law enforcement services. Is that the thought of everyone else, or am I out in left field? Law enforcement services would include sheriff department or Dillon Police Department costs versus public safety could include those costs, but it would also cover all of the infrastructure costs associated with that. It would cover anything to do with infrastructure associated with Highway 6 and that.
I agree. I think law enforcement is too narrowly defined.
If I may,
Yes.
yeah, I'm the one who had proposed that we add public safety, and what you just reiterated is exactly what I was proposing, if we can go back to that.
Everyone in agreement on that?
And what about the first bullet? Is everybody okay with that? You can put in Highway 6.
Yes, I think we should.
Yeah.
That's our main issue in liability. If it's not in there, is it not covered?
No, it would be covered.
It'd be covered.
This right here would be, if you added Highway 6 would be a way of communicating to voters and selling the issue to
Projects,
voters.
Highway 6 safety and maintenance such as improvements to streets and trails.
Yeah. Okay, so what's the specific language?
Let me bounce something off and see if this resonates. Councilmember Davis first.
I kind of like the infrastructure wording, if we could work it in there, as opposed to capital acquisitions. I'm not that sure that's clear. And I like including Highway 6, since that's been our hot button forever.
I definitely like including trails.
So, and if we change acquisition to infrastructure, am I correct, we can still use it for acquisition? Am I correct? Because infrastructure is property to be acquired.
Yeah, I think so.
So how about these words, capital infrastructure, projects, Highway 6 safety, and maintenance such as improvements to streets and trails?
Got it. Highway 6.
Safety,
Okay.
and after streets and trails.
Okay, let me read it back. So capital infrastructure projects, Highway 6 safety and maintenance, such as improvements to streets and trails.
Is that it? Thumbs up?
Yeah, I think so.
All right.
And then there'll be public safety and any lawful means to purpose. Okay. And that 2%, the number at the very start, the 1.6 million, needs to be very accurate. And it needs to be above what you think it will be, otherwise there could be a refund.
So we can't put the percent.
We have the percent, so the percent is there, 2%.
And you probably ought to raise that to $2 million.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Okay. Is 2 million still give you a cushion? A big
I think it
cushion?
gives us $400,000 cushion. It gives us
Okay.
And how will that matter 4 years from now when everyone's increased their rental fees?
It only matters in the very first year.
Okay.
Mine too.
Then after the first year, Tabor applies.
Yeah.
And if we Bruce,
Yeah.
If I may.
yes.
So I'm very concerned about plain talk and how we present this. One concern I had is whether we should clarify that this is an estimated 1.6 million or an estimated 2 million. Can Ms. Madsen address that?
You mean adding estimated to the ballot language?
Yeah, are we misleading if we are saying we intend to increase taxes by 1.6 million, which is a very specific figure, or two?
Right, I believe, I mean, Tabor sets out this specific language. I can pull up. Tabor. Well, it's not, it doesn't say, it's shall town of Keystone taxes be increased first fiscal year annually. I'd have to look at that to see if there's anything about estimated.
I've
Well,
noticed,
I have
why,
been a lot of litigation about ballot questions. I mean, my recommendation is to go with, I'd have to research that.
let me add another thing while you're researching. I'm wondering if we are more clearly communicating to the people of the town, if we begin, and if you're telling me that Tabor law refuses to allow it this way, then let me know. But I can't help but think we are more clearly communicating if we say, shall the town of Keystone collect a lodging tax at the rate of 2% on all of these things, with the revenues anticipated to equal approximately $2 million in the first fiscal year.
We can't. No.
We cannot?
We cannot. No. You have to, Tabor provides in the Colorado Constitution, shall district, and the word district is replaced by your name of your local government, taxes be increased, and then you have a choice of saying first or a phased in, final, full fiscal year, dollar increase annually, and then you go on. So that is the language that is set forth in Tabor that has to be, that's how you have to start your ballot question.
Okay. And back to my other point about the estimated, I appreciate that you're going to look into it, but an alternative would be as much as 2 million. I hate to mislead. That's my bottom line.
Well,
Thank
I
you.
think just the intent of Tabor is to provide the voters with information as far as what is the intent or what is the potential of revenues from the tax. And if you don't estimate that amount correctly, then you have to refund it to the voters. And so that's what the intent is so the voters know what they're signing, what they're approving with the ballot question.
Okay. Sounds like the Tabor law and I are both interested in the same things, but coming at it from different positions. Thank you for looking into that.
Yeah.
Any other comments or thoughts? So, do you have enough to go forward with on the language then?
Yes, and as I understand it, the plan is to bring this back again in draft form for the next meeting and then to potentially pass it at the following meeting in August.
And the town manager would come up with a date for a town hall meeting prior to that coming forth for final passage in the last meeting in August.
yeah, didn't we determine August
Yes.
20th?
And what was the date?
August 20th.
August 20th?
That's your second, oh, that's the town hall meeting.
Town hall. And getting back to the town manager, do you have, I know you have the other sheet you handed out to us.
Yeah, and once our town attorney, it still won't be finalized language until the last thing, but with the changes recommended today, I'm proposing that we put out a survey to the town of Keystone that will include our draft language, making it very clear this is draft language that will be finalized after the August 20 town meeting and our town hall at the August 27th town council meeting. And then we have a few polling questions. And I just put together a few brief ideas. Please weigh in and let me know what you think. And just some general questions. Do you own or rent a residence in Keystone? What neighborhood is that residence in? Are you a registered voter in Keystone? Do you operate a short-term rental? Do you operate or work for a business in Keystone? And then just a couple quick demographics, sex and age. I think that could limit the demographic information that might be useful to us. If we get a lot of negative comments from young people, whoever's taking up the banner from the council, once we pass the word, we'll know what groups to target specifically. So please weigh in.
Well, I just have one comment, which on the second polling group questions, the third one down. I think it's important that people understand that we're reinstating a tax that was here. And I know you kind of say that, but it's not as strong as I probably would like.
Are you on page 2 or page 3?
On page 3, the second set of polling questions.
So what you're saying, I believe, something like the first question. Or do you or would you support a ballot measure to reinstate the Summit County 2% lodging tax?
Yes.
In the town of Keystone, to keep the
I can wordsmith that.
because I'm not sure
Yeah.
to keep the revenue above the table limit would mean anything to people.
Yep.
I can do that.
Is it a deliberate order on that same page that number 2 is ahead of number 3? And are we concerned that leading with Breckenridge charge a 5.9 tax might incite people to reject it? Because a lot of people are hesitant to follow suit with Breckenridge. So I'm wondering if we should put 3 above 2. I don't know if we're splitting hairs. I just think comparing us, that is very important information. I'm just wondering if we lead with
So I
3
think,
instead of 2.
I think I'll take 3 out completely and start question 1 like the Keystone area previously had a Summit County 2% lodging tax. Would you support the ballot question to reinstate a 2% lodging tax?
And you may want to put then to be dedicated to the language we had before, infrastructure and public safety.
And maybe
and
instead-
all other.
And maybe instead of saying, if you were told that these towns charge that, saying something to the effect, starting with the fact that Keystone's lodging tax would be significantly
Yes.
lower than the other towns.
Yeah.
So it doesn't look like we're,
Yeah, Keystone, I
Trying
could
to be
start out
Breckenridge.
with
I know it's splitting hairs.
Keystone,
No, it's not.
the total Keystone
Yeah.
tax imposed on lodging will be 2%. Would you support the ballot measure if you were told that Breckenridge charges 5%?
That it's significantly lower than,
Well, I would, as we talked earlier, I would recommend that you, this would put Keystone's total cost of tax on lodging at whatever 3.5%. The current total tax on lodging in Breckenridge is 12.36.
yeah.
Silverthorne is this, Billings is this, and it rolls up to 18% over the time.
It's just semantics, but I think it makes
No,
a
no.
big difference in people's perceptions.
So,
Usually just a message.
I wouldn't start with Breckenridge, I'd start with
Put
another
that
town.
last.
okay,
It's a hot button,
Yeah.
I just went alphabetically.
but this is really comprehensive. You did
job I've done.
Yeah, but so, and all these taxes, what I did was I took out the county and state and housing, all our additional taxes in all our numbers. But I should put it back in.
Because it's apples to oranges, because, for instance, Dillon has both a lodging tax and a short-term rental tax. So the tax on lodging there for your short-term rental is actually significantly higher than just the lodging tax.
Yeah.
They have a mixture of those.
Dillon's, they're over 20% when you add they're at like 22% when you add the county and state taxes. Well, they're at 15.475 with their 8% lodging tax, their, I think it's a 5% other lodging tax, and then their sales tax.
Then you have sales, I thought lodging was less.
Yeah. So,
Helen,
but I'll change all these numbers to just complete total tax burden across the board.
And
That's
let's
what-
make it clear it's the complete total tax.
Total tax on
Yeah.
lodging.
Yeah.
thank you.
I have one,
Councilmember Barnett.
A hypothetical, the combination of Bruce with this. Say this passes, say next year, so say we pass a 2% tax. Say next year we decide we want to increase that to 2.1%. Do we, in addition to having to go through a ballot item to go from 2 to 2.1, hypothetically also have to read Bruce? Okay.
Let me just, I said no, and you won't ever have to.
Thank you.
The one language does it all.
Which is an important reason why we didn't put a,
But that limit still applies to the first year, right? That's what,
Yeah, it's weird that the first year question.
so it's just the first year issue.
Yes.
Any thoughts? Councilmember Davis.
You know, we talked about the language on debrucing, including grants, et cetera. I think we need, you know, let's make sure this language is consistent with the ballot language. Just to
yep. And I do have a question in there. One of my push-pulls is, would you support the measure if you were told that it would allow Keystone to apply for and receive both state and private grants for specific projects?
I like that, including that, but and when we're talking, you know, in the language about debrucing, I just think we need to keep stressing it everywhere we can. You just never know what people are going to read.
And then this language that would be included would be the actual ballot language that we select. So,
But, well, technically at this point, it would be the
proposed ballot language.
Right.
That's what I.
Any other questions or any other questions we want to pull?
Oh, there's two. Now I see. You have a group of polling questions for debrucing and a group of questions for
Logic.
lodging. Are we getting to too many questions? What's your experience on linked surveys?
Well, we're not asking for a lot of drafting. We only have one open-ended question in this. And so it's all just click yes, click no, click yes, click no. And really, it's only the first question that matters on every time. Unless that comes back really negative, then we have to try to figure out how to rebalance. So what are we at now? 4, 8, 15 total questions, but
You want to ask the questions first and then the demographic stuff later?
I'd like to weigh in on that.
Yes.
That was a recommendation I was going to make as well. Not only does it not distract from the real questions we want answered, but if someone were to come to the question about, do you own here or rent? Are you registered to vote? We wouldn't want them to think that is going to sway what we're doing. That's just, oh, by the way, information, not as important as the key questions we're asking.
That's a good idea. So I'll break the poll out into three specific categories. Have an opening paragraph saying we're going to ask you questions about a proposed debrucing measure, about a proposed lodging tax, and then demographic questions, or background, not even demographic, just background.
You're probably in that introductory piece going to have to very succinctly explain what
Very
debrucing.
short. Yes.
That
Yes, that's my other concern. I didn't know what debrucing meant when we started, so I don't know why anyone else should be expected to.
Even that is going to leave them, my first question I couldn't figure out, do you support a ballot measure that to allow the town of Keystone to keep revenue above the Tabor limit? And I thought long and hard, how do I say that then the Tabor limit, because that is a 12-page question if I try to explain.
Do you have the language what you use with key condo?
I do. I can
Why don't you
send
send it off to John?
I'll send it
It was fairly succinct to explain it. I think Valerie and Gretchen used it this weekend.
You have
with
it.
key condo.
But the actual
Yeah.
Tabor limit is
Oh.
complicated mathematical
You don't
formula.
want to use it. I don't think you want to use that type of language
Yeah.
explaining the debrucing.
And he has it.
Yeah.
Could we not use a simple phrase like a Tabor waiver?
No.
No, because there's so much involved in Tabor. So we're only dealing with one part of it.
Right. You're not dealing with the removal of the citizen's right to approve all tax increases.
No, or ballot language, or there's so much in
Yeah.
Tabor.
Could we use wording like state limitations on revenue, parentheses, Tabor, something so that you've got a little bit of explanation, a quick and dirty explanation of
That's a good phrase.
what we're really asking.
State limitations on revenue. Somehow put Tabor in there.
I just put it in parentheses.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good language.
And I'd ask our town attorney, in your experience with these debrucing measures, have you seen any language that other towns may have used in that? To explain it, not the legal language, but to explain it?
Not off the top, but I can certainly find some. Yeah, I could definitely find some.
There would need to be a couple sentences for a very complex topic.
Yes.
Strange thing with us, most towns when they debruce know what their Tabor limit is, at least for that year. We don't have a Tabor limit yet. Maybe. Douglas Spruce would sue us about that.
He's getting old.
Yep.
Do you have enough guidance?
I think I do, unless there's anything else.
Could you let us know what the timeline is that you're thinking of for when this will go out and when you're going to ask them, our folks to respond by no later than?
I'm going to put this out as soon as possible, later this week, after we institute the changes to the draft ballot question and the changes on this. And I think probably August 20th should be our last day to respond, or do you want to give them after the rest of that week? Maybe the Friday, which is the 23rd, 24th?
Most people are going to respond immediately.
Yeah.
My experience with these type of surveys, you get your big flood of stuff immediately, and then it drops off the cliff because it's now old email. So you could almost put the requirement by the next council meeting, so we would have the information to decide if we wanted to go
Yeah, and we
forward.
have a 3-week.
The 3-week break, so.
Yeah.
How does it compare to the town hall?
Then
They're coming back.
that means we'd have it the week before the town hall.
That would be very good.
Yeah.
Okay. The day before the meeting.
Yeah. And you will have
And-
Councilmember Kerr.
Yes. So a corollary question would be, how do we intend to get this out? I know we have a number of emails of people who have signed up for the newsletter that comes out from the town, but I believe perhaps we should be considering some creative ways to bring people's attention to it. Do you have any thoughts on that, or can we brainstorm that?
I have a few ideas. Use our email, obviously, just post it on our website. Reach out to KNC and KOA, although they don't capture everything. And actually get a blurb in the Summit Daily saying we're seeking input. You can find the survey on the town website.
It is.
That sounds strong. How about next page in our Facebook site?
Yeah. Sarah, I keep forgetting about our Facebook site.
I mean next door. I don't mean, I mean next door.
Councilmember Davis.
Do we have a way to limit the number of responses from a single person?
Yes, probably.
I think
Although
that's
those
right.
Survey Monkey
Yeah.
limits responses to one response per IP address.
Yeah, so I mean, technically, people could answer on their phone, answer on their computer, but we can limit it.
I just,
Yeah,
phone and computer's fine. I just don't want 15 from one person.
yep,
And if we can limit it, that's great.
yeah, we can do that with Survey Monkey.
Because that would skew the
Yeah.
results.
All right. Any other thoughts? Anything we need, do you need any of the guidance from us, John?
I think I'm good to go right now, so.
Would you like us to take one more look at the questions?
I'll send out the link actually to you as the council members.
For one last look.
One last look and to give it a soft, if we could all just do it, kind of a soft opening to make sure everything is working and registering correctly.
And if any council member has a major change they think need to be made, they just communicate that directly to you.
Yep.
Is that okay with the rest of the council members? All right. Anything else on this topic? All right. Next topic is the discussion of 2024 model traffic code. Mr. Town Manager.
And I will send this right over to our town attorney again.
So at the July 9th meeting, direction was provided to draft an ordinance, bring back a draft ordinance adopting the 2024 model traffic code with some additions for including a prohibition on engine brakes or Jake brakes, adding in parking violations, and adding in any new state laws that were passed in 2024, that legislative session. So in the packet, there is a draft ordinance. It's quite detailed, but it does include the automated vehicle AVIS system so that town could put in place the speed radar, the traffic lights, for red light tickets, and potentially other sound radar. I didn't look at that. That's not something I looked at, but I can do that. Then also, and to work with CDOT for putting in those speed radar, photo radar bands. That was the new language that was added in 2024 by the legislature. And then the draft ordinance also includes a provision for the new cell phone law, which you have to have a hands-free cell phone starting in January 2025. And then I also added here the parking regulations for the town of Dillon. And that's a choice that council can decide to put in place different regulations for parking. But I thought that might be a good starting place.
Councilmember Parmet.
Thank you. I guess my question to you would be whether if the potential use of sound cameras was going to be used to enforce a nuisance law, is that actually governed and restricted by the state regulations around speed cameras and red light cameras? Because if it's not, then I don't think we have to specifically call it out, right?
And that's not something I looked at specifically when I was putting this together. It does, the first part of that section 110.5, it defines an automated vehicle identification system as a machine used to automatically detect a violation of a traffic regulation.
Right.
So arguably we could say this is not a traffic regulation, it's a nuisance regulation.
Thank you. Follow-up question. There was on page 74 of the packet, 3.5a, so defining Jake brakes is the term I'm using. Is it problematic to use that term since it's a nickname for a registered trademark product from one particular company? Jacob's Brakes is a registered trademark of companies.
Can we just say engine braking
We can say engine braking.
or engine compression braking would be technically accurate?
Yeah, we can do that.
I just, in my Googling, I've heard where that company has actually sent attorneys out over using the term J-Works.
Yeah, no, we can definitely do that.
The parking regulations, I don't know if we want to dive into that now, but there's definitely a lot of things in there that it would restrict that are currently common practice in the town.
Which section are you talking about?
Putting those parking regulations in, like say page 80 or 21 of the parking regs. 3B, unlawful to park or locate any vehicle or trailer on any street in the town between 2 and 6. I live on a public street that is privately maintained and privately platted, and I can certainly tell you that people park on the street. So I think that technically wasn't allowed under the county, but now we're making our own rules, and it would technically be not allowed under these rules.
But I would want that, in other areas of Keystone, I would want that enforced.
I can see why there's a need for some nuance here, so thus I bring it up. A privately maintained cul-de-sac is very different than some other areas. You could have wording about parking only allowed for owners or something like that.
Would that reach?
Well, is it a public street that's privately maintained?
Public street, privately maintained, yes.
Okay.
But I know the hazard here is that like you don't want residential streets to end up being resort and business parking, particularly for folks who are walking.
You know, you also don't want it to be used for overnight parking for RVs for people camping out.
Certainly, but I think RV camping, we would be prohibiting in a different part.
And we also don't, although it wouldn't apply on there, on other streets, it's a matter of snow plowing.
Right. Sure.
One way that you could do this is you could say that street parking is prohibited where there is signage posted, but then you'd be under the obligation to post the signs.
But they wouldn't enforce it anyway through the county. We had to post signs, even on our county road. They wouldn't enforce it until we put signs up.
Right, because you were responsible for maintenance on your road.
No, but just law enforcement. It had nothing to do with our maintenance. It had to do with enforcing people not parking on county roads.
I could simply, after discussing this, see a comment that I made last week's session, which is, it's a nuisance if it's causing a problem, and if it's causing a problem, then, for example, people being parked in the way of snowplow, then it gets mentioned and reported, and the nuisance code gets enacted. And if it's not bothering anyone, no one will do anything about it.
But in other areas of Keystone, I don't think you want to give that latitude. I think you're in a very specific area, whereas most of the other areas of Keystone, for instance, the others.
Well, we have people that, they know that's close to the gondola, so they'll come and park there. So we need to avoid that.
If I can clarify my statement, I think I'm dropping my objection on the basis that I don't think anyone's going to call for the enforcement of the nuisance code on my street unless someone perceives there to be a nuisance.
Yeah.
Well, we could also, correct me if I'm wrong, Jennifer, but put up signs coming to town, parking on public streets is prohibited between 2 a.m. and 6 a.m. unless otherwise posted. That way we could post signs allowing parking.
Well, so I think they can go park in the alders then.
Yeah, we can't put it there at all.
You did lead on to, no, what he's saying is it's prohibited unless it's specifically signed and authorized.
Yes.
So it would be up to the alders if they wanted to allow it, to put a sign up with the approval of the town.
Follow-up question to that, could the sign they put up restrict that parking to owners of the abutting property?
I mean, you'd have to spell that out in the ordinance. So if you wanted to go with the language that parking is prohibited unless permitted, we want to clarify that in the language,
And would that be permitted by the town?
unless permitted by the town, yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
And I don't think the town wants to establish a permitting process for parking on the streets. Am I correct, Mr. Town Manager?
Only in the very largest scope of it. A sign going up Razor Drive saying on-street parking is allowed. Not on-street parking is allowed for the homeowners. This is when we this is a good way to get neighbors really upset at each other.
Right, I think that's right. I see some concerns because I certainly see a lot of on-street overnight parking there. And then similarly, it's more restrictive when you come down to at unlawful to park or locate a trailer not attached to a vehicle on any street, alley, or right-of-way within a town at any time. So I guess the question on that is, I've got, I see a pop-up trailer parked, not on the street, not in the gutter, but on the grass next to my property. Is that now banned?
If it's on the grass, that might not be included here. That would be
It's included in the land use and development code, where you can park a camper or trailer. It has to be on gravel or paved surface, not the front setback.
Sorry, can you say the last one again?
Not in the front setback. And typical front setbacks from property line are 25 feet. I don't know for sure with that subdivision, but 9 times out of 10, it's a 25-foot setback that you're not allowed to park in.
And that's what the county had?
Yes.
Thank you for that clarification.
But it wouldn't be enforced unless you call.
Well, no, I mean, I don't think we should pass laws that we assume are not going to be enforced.
Well, no, I'm just saying.
The
but
definition of a nuisance law
we're not
is it has to be a
going
nuisance.
looking at it.
Someone has to be bothered by it, or it's not a nuisance.
This is the model traffic code.
Yeah.
Good point. So
And-
maybe this belongs under nuisance and not traffic code.
Well, and technically, a nuisance defines what a nuisance is. I don't have to see a nuisance to be bothered by the nuisance if it's defined in the nuisance code. Otherwise, you can get away with everything unless it's necessarily reported. I mean, if no one sees me dumping these toxic chemicals in the right of way, does that mean it's not a nuisance? So that's what nuisance code does, is define nuisances, and just like this defines.
I take exception to your example because you're dumping toxic chemicals into a waterway that causes detectable harm. And that's a nuisance, it's detectable or felt harm.
Well,
If a tree falls in the forest and no one hears it, then there's not a problem.
well, it's a detectable harm if you're parked where you're not supposed to park too. Just because no one complains doesn't mean it didn't necessarily offend someone. It didn't offend them to the level that they wanted to go through the hassle of calling and making a report. It's kind of the whole, but back to the parking, I mean, I think we really need to dial down, is we shouldn't pass something that we don't intend on enforcing regardless of whether there's a complaint or not.
And one comment related to enforcing is that your law enforcement is going to be enforcing your model traffic code. So if you include the parking regulations in your model traffic code, that's law enforcement's going to be enforcing that. Whereas with the nuisance, then that is probably going to be somebody else, not likely your law enforcement officer.
But it could be code enforcement, could be one and the same with law enforcement.
Could be,
And building off of that, I would like to see parking enforced by law enforcement, because lots of times these are issues where we want this vehicle out of here, or need this vehicle out of here now, and police just tend to have more clout when they call the tow companies, less risk when they're having someone's car towed as opposed to a code enforcement officer standing out there waiting for a tow truck to take someone's car. So,
But they won't enforce it without a sign, will they? That's what I've been told. Even though we were a county road, unless we had a sign up that said no parking, they would not enforce it. So is that the same with the town?
It might be, that might have been what the county regulations were related to parking, but you don't have to have a sign to enforce parking.
Hallelujah, because they keep getting knocked down.
but I do think we should put up signs coming into town.
Yeah, I agree.
Just giving that heads up to everyone.
What would the sign say?
No parking on
Public roads?
public roads between 2 a.m. and 6 a.m.
So is that negate on my road after 6? Yeah.
A.m., 2
Is that-
a.m. and 6
What
a.m.
happens from 6 a.m. to 2 a.m.?
Yeah. Are they allowed to park on my road?
As this was written, yes.
No way, we have to change that.
Unless we put parking signs up. No parking signs where you don't want them parking. And am I correct? Is that correct? Because if you had an entrance, you had entrances into an area like, and I'll pick East Keystone, where you have 2 entrances in East and West Independence Road. If you put a sign up at the entrance to East Keystone Road that said no street parking allowed, would that apply to everything in the?
I assume so, assuming we have that right in the,
Yeah, we'd have to put something in the code that it would prohibit, if you have a sign posted, then there's no parking allowed on that street.
Because this doesn't help us with resort parking very quickly. This is like ineffective.
Yeah.
No, and I'm concerned that like, okay, if you want to have people over for a party one night, if they ban all parking on town roads during the day, or then they can't park. But also, we don't want everyone to be parking on residential roads so that they can walk across Highway 6 to the ski lifts or Monson Road.
We normally call our neighbors if somebody's having a big event.
Right, but that's not what we're talking about. John made it perfectly clear that we can have roving enforcers going around looking for any violation with no complaints. So if that's the way we're going to write and enforce this,
We have to think of the consequences.
well, at least the way it needs to be. I'm not necessarily saying that's going to be our practice, but we have to
Intent.
write the code in the assumption, if it allows that, we have to assume it may happen, unless we specifically disallow it. Or councils change, town managers get old.
No.
Development directors die.
Don't like that.
But I think we definitely, well, no matter what, I very much that we should be able to ban parking by putting up a sign, although then you get the wonderful joy of seeing cars parked right in front of that sign. I mean, right underneath, right there. People can't read.
Or they try to rip it out so they can go to sleep.
well, we can certainly have signs that prohibit it. As far as the examples I gave, I guess we can rely on the discretion of our law enforcement officers.
But you're absolutely right. There are times people need to park
In the streets.
in the streets.
So,
Construction, house construction, the building house,
They always park there,
8 cars there for the day.
or 25.
There are actually provisions in the code And when you send a building permit, they address that issue. Keep in mind that parking regulations, especially up in Summit County, serve two purposes. One, to facilitate snow plowing. Having cars in the right of way is problematic for whoever is plowing, whether it be the town or a contract or whatever. And two, there are roads, a lot of roads in the town limits that don't meet county road and bridge standards. And as such, when you park in the right of way, you actually pose a significant problem for emergency response. So it really stems from a health, safety, welfare standpoint. So just, if you're going to go that route, I think you need to develop some degree of criteria to evaluate where it's appropriate, where it's not, and when.
I agree with you because I can give a perfect example of that. Almost every day, some semi will park on East Hanson, and sometimes they park far enough over that passenger vehicles can get by, and sometimes they park in the middle of the road and passenger vehicles can't even get by. And that's been a perennial problem. But they're doing deliveries for the commercial complex, but they, I think, probably don't understand that it's an actual road and not a parking lot.
I can take this feedback that you provided related to that section and try to work on a revised draft of that section implementing this feedback related to parking.
What's our intent
Good
then?
luck. I'm not sure there was consensus.
Yeah, I don't know what our intent is.
Well, it's not, what I'm hearing is that as the general rule is that parking should not be permitted on public streets. And that's the general rule, and that there might be exceptions that need to be added.
I think at a minimum, parking should not be allowed on public streets during ski days, when the ski mountain is open,
Or during summer days when they.
or with summer days when you have festivals.
And then that kills the parking.
You could geographically, you could have two sets of regulations based on geography.
You could, if you had an area, I would imagine that people, except for your area, every other area would want them restricted.
Yeah.
Because they have significant problems with people coming and parking, taking the resort bus to the mountain during that time period. So I think we're really dealing with an issue in the Loveland Pass Village zone area more than we are the rest of Keystone.
Probably so. I do remember one day in the last 11 years where somehow the line of cars got diverted off 6 into the neighborhood and they parked the street up, but one day in 11 years isn't very often. Could always change it later.
Yeah. But if we put exceptions in there for your area, and there was street parking during ski days, there was nothing you could do about it.
Right, if it became a problem, we'd have to readdress it.
Yeah.
How hard would that be to redress?
We'd have to do a change to your
Your ordinance.
ordinance.
But it wouldn't be,
No, 2 readings.
okay.
So describe to us what you think you're taking back.
Right.
So I'm hearing no parking on public streets, and what I would recommend is that there's dates instead of ski season and summer season, that it's November, not November 1st to,
Like that, no parking.
oh,
We're literally at ground zero of the resort. They keep
okay, so I'm hearing 2 different things though. There's,
Why don't we do 2 things? Carve out the Loveland Pass Village zone issue, because I think we could probably address it separately from a geographic standpoint. Then we're talking about the rest of the resort. So we're talking about one very small community in the resort. Or a community of about, 60, 70 homes.
okay, and so what's the rest of the resort?
Everything else
Rest
is
of
Keystone.
No, I know, but what are the regulations that you want for the rest of the
No
resort?
street parking.
No street parking at all? Okay.
And I should clarify, I don't think they do much on-street parking in Loveland Pass Village, just the zone, just that one cul-de-sac.
But do you have any residents in Loveland Pass Village that park on the street?
I haven't seen it very much. They park on gravel carve-outs that are off the street.
I feel like some of them more recently have,
Well, maybe that's a discussion.
they get in trouble in the winter, but they do it anyway.
Gotcha. Maybe a discussion with the constituents, and then I can get back to you.
Now, I do have a question. Practicality, a party,
Right.
what happens? I mean, I guess I've lived in communities where that was kind of like, yeah, they just look beyond that. There's a party.
Well, I can look at some exceptions, and see what that looks like. There isn't any urgency for this, so we can talk about it some more.
And this is one of those where discretion of law enforcement and code enforcement, even though I say we can't count on it, but they're looking for that one bad apple or those 30 bad apples who are not in any way associated with each other at all.
Okay. Thank you, Jim.
And would it be, and again, I'll go back to a comment that was made earlier by Councilmember Armet and perhaps as a solution with the no parking on streets unless parking signage allows it, or something like that. And then that would allow some to put up, if they desire, a parking allowed, street parking allowed.
Yeah, you probably want to put the town sign, the town logo at that.
Right.
And the town could have the sign say parking for residents only. I mean, that's very common in cities.
Parking for, then we're permitting vehicles.
Well, this model traffic code already has an exception allowable by local law enforcement for overnight parking. So the town's already in that business, and I don't think it's going to be a big burden or a common thing. But
And renters wouldn't be allowed to.
you could phrase it, well, I mean, they're residents. I didn't say owners, you could say residents. Residents and guests only.
But most of those towns, they do have permits that they give out to those folks
Yeah.
who are in that area. And again, I'm concerned about a burden onto the town staff for permitting. That's a tough one. And again, how would a law enforcement officer discern if the town didn't have a permit that you were authorized or not authorized?
It's a great question. I would suggest that primarily the sign functions as a deterrent if it actually became an issue where we needed to enforce and have permits. I'm guessing it's going to be a relatively small number of permits, and it being incumbent on residents who wanted a permit to come and get one.
Makes a degree of sense, but yeah, pushing the problem a little off down the road, that might not ever be a problem.
Might not be a problem.
Yeah.
Now we're talking about stone, but I could see in other areas, the private roads in the ranch,
Sanctuary.
sanctuary could put something up like that, request. Soda Ridge Road could ask for something like that in their area. Although we don't have a lot of parking on Soda Ridge or Wild Irishman Road for single-family homes.
And I'll tell you, is some roads, I just feel town should never, we shouldn't give permits for parking on Soda Ridge Road. It's
No.
too busy a road.
Yeah. And then the question, like, now I'll pick an area like Stone, which the roads are fairly narrow. It goes back to the public safety question that Mr. Hirsch brought up. If parking along that street would block the ability of a fire vehicle from going up the street, how do you handle that?
I think that's a great question. If the town was going to put these signs up, the town would have to take a glance at the width of the street and say, well, you can only park on one side. Or you can only park on right of way, you can't park on pavement, which actually is a great solution because in the winter, when the road naturally narrows due to plowing, I mean, you just lose your street parking in the winter because that's the physics of living in the mountains. But in the summer, you can park on the grass, although I guess actually the parking restrictions don't actually say right of way for vehicles, only street.
Right, but we have a land use code that says you can't park on the grass.
You can't store on the grass, right?
Park and store.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes. It's in chapter 11 portion of the code. It's where community appearance.
And as an aside, I see this issue all the time in the cove when the Cow parking lot gets full and people park in the right of way there off the pavement and always turn the sign around so they can say they didn't see it. But yeah, it's tough to carve out exceptions, but it's not impossible.
And how about this as a going forward? Let's ask the town manager and the town attorney, after hearing this discussion, to see what they think language could be that would be doable and not create an undue burden on the town staff. Is that acceptable? Acceptable to everybody?
And I have one more question for the town attorney. Although we don't have it, do we need to put language about parking in an EV charging station in our parking code? Because I know there's state statute.
I will look at that. I don't know the answer to that question.
Councilmember Davis.
I mean,
I'm so used to being put in.
I've been thinking about the changing the subject to hands-free, cell phone usage, driving. And so the new state regulation says no, right? It has to be hands-free.
Right.
And so do we have the option of not running with that?
You do? Yeah, you do have that option. Let me just see where it is, because it's, so,
My challenge is when I see idiots texting and stuff like that, or reading a book, I mean, that's outrageous.
Oh, I'm for sure, that's right.
But I do see folks that are lost, and are looking at they may even stop on the sign, look at a map.
But if they stop, that's not a problem.
Is it? I mean, I think they're still considered a moving vehicle, even if
They're stopped
engines
on the way.
But you can see right.
That's different.
So the code, the language provides that an individual operating a motor vehicle shall not be cited for a violation of this section unless a law enforcement officer saw the individual use a mobile electronic device in a manner that caused the individual to drive in a careless and imprudent manner without due regard for the width, grade, curves, corners, traffics.
Okay, so
Yeah,
they're showing they're careless.
exactly. Yeah. Which, we had, there was another provision, this replaced a similar provision about the use of cell phone while driving, and I'm not aware, at least it's not a ticket that's frequently issued. because of that provision. There's a similar provision.
So somebody could be on the phone driving as long as they're not near enough.
Yes,
They won't be pulled over.
right. And the officer has to see them with the mobile device.
It sounds like the intent is more like putting the sign up as a warning, so people get used to not using mobile devices in their hands
Well, in the press, I'm sure,
in the press.
come January, there'll be news stories about this.
Okay. Another kind of wordsmithing here on page 21 of the ordinance. 3E. Street parking, vehicles parked on a two-way roadway shall be stopped or parked with the right-hand wheels parallel to and within 12 inches of the right-hand curb. Not many of our roads have curbs,
Yeah.
so with an edge of driving surface or something.
It might also be worthwhile, once this is in a place that you like it, to maybe try to get some feedback from Dillon Law Enforcement to see if they have any additional changes that they would recommend related to enforcement.
That's good.
Good idea.
Anything else? You guys have enough to play with the wording up for us? I see a begrudging nod.
Oh, no, yes, I'm good.
Obviously, this is going to take a while. The next topic is discussion of nuisances. Nuisance ordinance.
Okay, so this is one we started at our last meeting. Got through some of it. Council asked staff to come back with some sample language on a couple of issues, and we still have some proposed nuisances to go through. This will come back to another workshop as a ordinance in the future for more wordsmithing, adding, deleting issues as council sees fit. And then 2 more meetings as an ordinance. So we'll just dive right in, kind of where we left off before.
Do we want to go to the sample wording, or do we want to start past that, things we had discussed?
Which would you prefer?
Good.
I have 3 items from the sample wording.
All right.
I think working backwards from simplest first. 8, firearm discharge prohibition. I would ask for an exception for firearms for pest control, so something along the lines of, and I pulled this out of Sugar Bush's ordinances. Firearms may be discharged on private property within the town with the consent of the property owner only if A, for purposes of nuisance control as per Colorado Wildlife Commission regulations, and I can, obviously you can write this in real legal. B, for the discharge, if the discharge is done in a manner that does not endanger any persons or property, and C, ensures that any projectiles from firearm do not leave grounds or space of that private property. Reason for this, we had flooding in my neighborhood caused by beavers, both on open space and on Forest Service land, and the county told us to get rid of the beavers or they would fine us. After talking to CPW and Animal Control, they said, you can try and trap good luck, or you can shoot them under nuisance law, which ultimately our neighborhood had did.
You also had wordage in there where it doesn't cause harm to persons or property. Discharges would be allowed.
Yeah, discharge is done in a manner that does not endanger any persons or property. So you can't hurt anyone, you can't hurt any property, and if you're shooting on private property like that open space, you can't be shooting into the neighbor's yard.
But you could be shooting at 3 in the morning. You-
Noise ordinances would still apply, I assume.
Yeah. Noise ordinances are incredibly difficult to enforce, especially against discharge of firearms.
Do you want to just put an hours restriction, like 10 p to 6 a or something?
As someone who,
Daylight hours?
this is up to you guys, but good God, the county approved shooting range is a real pain in the butt, even with its strictly regulated hours and sound capturing walls that they just recently built. It's up to you as a council, whether you want someone to be discharging a firearm safely in their backyard within hours of any time.
I mean, I use subsonic 22, you could say, and you could add another stipulation, dawn to dusk and subsonic ammunition or sound suppressor must be used.
If I may.
If you may,
Thank you. I think our council member Parmet has made a very strong argument. It makes perfect sense, especially if we add the stipulation that the town manager recommended. After all, if we are going to clarify that it needs to be something that doesn't endanger people or property, then you need to be able to see, and daylight hours make sense. I think we have to have certain trust in the fact that people are able to follow rules and not presume otherwise.
Just as a point of clarification, none of the other communities allow discharge of firearms within their boundaries. It will become an issue.
What is a firearm?
Okay.
Pellet gun?
No.
That's not, so it has to have.
We'd have to define firearm.
I guess I would say, like, this special carve-out is based on a real scenario that occurred, and if you think this will become a problem, I would ask you, why hasn't it already been a problem?
No, I'm not in any way saying the control of nuisance rodents, issues like that. I agree with that 100%. I'm a bit concerned about allowing anyone to shoot firearms off in your neighborhood.
and to say, I think it did say, I was after a ground squirrel that was creating a problem.
Well, yes, if they're going to be shooting ground squirrels every
They could be, but
day, but
you know, in other words,
Yeah.
the nuisance piece. How about if, and since this has probably happened once in this community's existence, just requiring for the control of nuisances and that it would require a permit from law enforcement.
That's.
Sounds great.
I'd go with that. They can get a permit.
And then if law enforcement would be looking at where they're going to be shooting, and would verify that it was not. I mean, there's things like ricochets and other things that can create, and our lots aren't terribly large here.
No.
And,
This is open space that backs to national forest.
but who owns the open space?
The HOA.
All right, your HOA back in that area.
Yeah. I think this is,
Other HOAs actually do trap, like Sanctuary. They have a similar problem when they trap.
Same for.
It is certainly permissible for any HOA to pass policies of their own, yes?
But if not an HOA officially, you're a PUD, right?
no, we're an HOA.
Are you an HOA?
Yeah.
All right.
Well, I would go with what you suggested.
Yeah.
So all the stipulations that I listed and permission from law enforcement.
Permit from law enforcement, and the only exception would be for nuisances.
Yeah, only that, that's the
Only
only
that.
exception.
well, there are some others, personal safety, there are some
Yeah,
Well,
so,
Second Amendment exceptions that have to be allowed.
yeah, but that would be
Bears
allowed,
trying to
but
eat you, that's different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You don't need a permit then.
Right, you don't have time to call an expert.
But in most cases, you wouldn't have a firearm in your lot when they're coming.
When the bear's trying to eat me,
Yeah.
if I'm getting eaten by a black bear, I've done something terribly
You're wrong.
wrong.
Yes.
They usually run away or ignore me.
Can I just chime in on this
Yeah.
firearm code? Typically, a firearm code is also is considered a general offense. It's a criminal offense in your code rather than a nuisance.
Yeah.
Because it is unlawful under state law, the person can be jailed under state law. So it, for discharge of the firearm.
Illegal discharge.
Not anywhere. I mean, there's certain provisions about it, but there is state law that prohibits discharge of firearm.
For example, you have to be a minimum distance from structures according to state laws. And you can't shoot across a roadway, you can't shoot across a trail, all of those things. That's what you're referring to.
Yes. And yes.
Well, back to
If we require a permit,
with the things there, well, the three that we have.
to meet those conditions, and you have to have a permit from law enforcement.
And we can put down your criminal code, rather than nuisance there. And actually, to tell the truth, this would much rather, I would much rather send police officers
Right.
to enforce a firearm restriction than a code
Oh,
officer.
yeah.
So you're saying put this into the criminal code and not in the nuisance code?
Yeah.
All right. That'll have everybody. All right.
I'm really,
And next,
Aaron, I agree.
The next one I have was, I know it's large, but the wording here is pretty simple. It's so simple that I think it's a little unclear.
Can you, what page?
That is,
It's 89 of the 149 pages.
okay. So it just says, shall be unlawful for a person owning a dog or other pet to permit such animal to run at large, or someone else's dog at large. I think if, and then there's a carve out here for livestock, which kind of doesn't apply, locating, retrieving wild game, which doesn't really apply. Assisting law enforcement officers, or being trained for any of these pursuits, we might want to clarify, like someone training an avalanche dog, that's something that actually would apply within our town, would matter. And I found some wording in another ordinance, and there's actually covered both dogs and cats. I don't know if you want to do that or not. Outdoor cats tend to kill a lot of birds, which is bad, but outdoor cats tend to get killed real quick up here. So, there's read, dogs or cats on a leash and accompanied by, or must be, or it's going to say all these things and then saying, if you do all of this, then the dogs are allowed. Dogs or cats on a leash and accompanied by a responsible and capable person, or accompanied by and under the control and direction of a responsible and capable person, so as to effectively restrain as if by leash, shall be permitted in streets or on public land, unless the town is posted in an area with signs reading dogs or cats prohibited.
So can I ask, because that was on mine, is that, I remember there's some language about, go back to the leash law or not, if they were, had voice command or voice.
Or an electronic collar.
And I
I would
would,
want voice control, physical control, be voice control.
Yeah,
and I'd be happy.
which is why it says, and capable of, so you know, if it's a 5-year-old with a dog, and the dog weighs 150 pounds, they're not capable of restraining a dog that's not listening.
So I'd be supportive of that. That was the item I had as well.
Okay.
Could you repeat again what you were proposing?
cats? Dogs on a leash and accompanied by a responsible and capable person, or accompanied by and under the control and direction of a responsible and capable person, so as to effectively have restrained as if by leash, shall be permitted in streets or on public lands, unless the town has posted an area with signs reading dogs prohibited.
What code is that?
That's the sample language under 2. Do you want me to email it to you?
Oh, no, I assume you were reading it from another municipal code.
I forgot.
Oh, okay.
I think it was in Virginia.
So you email that, please email all
I will email that to you all.
Yeah.
As a working draft.
And change working.
The next item,
The third item is item 1 on page 88, storage of vehicles.
now what,
There's a
8 of what?
88, or page 1 of 3 of the nuisance document.
And this was one that there was a question of whether we wanted this even in the code. So I brought sample language to kind of more define this discussion here.
I appreciate the sample language provided. It's my general feeling that for the vast majority of this town, the storage of vehicles is governed either by already established code or by HOAs, and there are very, very, very few places where that doesn't apply. It's pretty much only Loveland Pass Village, and then I guess 1 or 2 outlier lots. So it's, the way that it's written here is, 1, I think quite ineffectual, and B, doesn't draw the line between egregious and not. For example, someone in Loveland Pass Village has a sailboat pulled up into their driveway. Oh, well, if they would only build a 5-foot fence around that, that would make things better. That's the type of thing that doesn't really help with an RV or a camper, and I don't think that we should be putting up 20-foot fences either. I think that this is generally covered by HOAs. I think that we didn't become a town to write HOA rules for Loveland Pass Village, but to address some of the issues that fellow council members have brought up of more egregious situations. I don't know if your example, Valerie, would have been covered by the code that Lindsay was referencing or not. Or if there could be some way that we could craft the language, if we all decided we want this in here, in some way that deals with egregious violations and doesn't specifically try and say, well, people living in Loveland Pass Village have to build 5-foot fences around sailboats.
Comments?
Are you in an HOA that addresses this?
Well, the problem is where HOAs converge or non-HOA lots converge.
Right.
And it really stinks for the ones where they converge. And I had never lived in an HOA until I lived in this one. And you don't understand why an HOA is necessary until you have issues with issues. And not all these lots are governed by, because of how the brainchildren who laid out these lots didn't include the south side of the road. It's very incongruent and still stands to impact our quality of life and our property values, is what I'm saying. It's very incongruent with the area. And I understand where you're coming from 100%, but it is a major issue for us.
So it sounds like there's an outlier issue there, and it's egregious. And I don't think the solution is to, the example language here is what I would expect an HOA to write out. And then it would apply to all the HOAs, including my own, which might not necessarily want that, and if it did, we would have it. So how do we address, or do we address the few outlier non-HOA lots, and how do we address egregious issues without being draconian?
And LPV doesn't have an HOA, which
Right.
they've discussed, do we need an HOA because they want to be able to set their own standards. And I don't like over-governance, but when you need it, it's so necessary.
Let me ask the community development director, what does land use code say?
With regards to
Which the vehicles and and all of that?
There are certain places you can park vehicles that are operating, there's certain places you can park vehicles that are not operating, including trailers and roads and toys. So it depends on what the property is zoned and how the property is laid out. So it's on a case-by-case basis, depending on the zoning designation, is my best answer to you. There isn't one size fits all.
Yeah.
And that's the problem, is we are trying to do one size fits all here, whereas almost, and most of the sizes are already addressed, there's only a few exceptions. If we enact this, for example, personal impact example, the neighbor that abuts my lot has a bunch of vehicles that have been stored for years there. I ignored them, my neighbor built his own fence. And that fence would make it relatively okay, according to this, but, okay, let's go back to that pop-up camper. If I move that pop-up camper to the side of my house, now I have to build a fence all the way around my house in order to have a pop-up camper stored there on my own property. But not because the HOA said so, but because because we're trying to solve a problem over there, we then affect everyone else, and that's what I'm trying to find where our nuance is. How do we solve the one outlier without forcing that one size fits all?
So here's a question. It goes back to, again, land use. If land use allows it, should that be considered a nuisance by the town or not? And then it ends up being a code enforcement issue from a land use standpoint, which we already have. Code enforcement also enforces land use issues, right?
Yes.
So if they're violating code, then code enforcement would deal with it. So the question is, do we need a separate item here? Then the question for your area, what does the code say for that particular lot?
Well, we inherited crappy code from the county. What is the
No,
problem?
let's back up. Have you looked at specifically whether that's authorized by the,
Yeah, we talked about it.
So, I would imagine that if I were to go through Loveland Pass Village, I likely, based on solely code and outside storage requirements, I would guess that I could find a minimum of 10 violations. Now, the county works on a complaint basis. They don't have a staffing, and I might add that you don't either right now. With that being said, we can enforce via the land use and development code. We had a conversation probably 6 meetings back with regards to the difference between enforcement via the land use and development code and licensing short-term rentals. They're two different animals. Yes, we can enforce. It's a longer, drawn-out process, and quite frankly, it's difficult. But there is enough teeth in the land use development code to at least initiate a process, and usually you get some degree of compliance up front, then you always have the person that will fight you. So if there are certain properties out there that don't comply, and there simply are, then if I receive a complaint, it is my job to enforce the land use and development code. And I would initiate a process to try to address that issue.
Sounds like you just need a complaint to initiate.
yeah.
I really am. I need to be the witch.
And going back to,
Councilmember Sullivan.
I guess I'm listening to all these sides, sympathy, a lot of sympathy for in certain situations. But I kind of feel, listening to Aaron, thinking that we probably should not try to have one size fits all from town. And I do know my HOA, we're pretty adamant about how long an RV can be there, or a trailer, or they set rules based on their HOA. And I probably run with that.
In other words, you would allow land use development to,
Correct.
Other thoughts? I know that doesn't help you, Mallory.
Yeah, and actually, as written, this wouldn't help Valerie either, and wouldn't affect, you kind of, inoperable or unlicensed vehicles, is how this was written. So if you want to park a sailboat in your front lot, all you have to do is make sure that trailer has a license plate on it. Valerie's neighbor, probably all of those trailers and vehicles are licensed and operable.
No,
Oh,
I don't think snowcats are licensed.
You can-
Antique snowcats that don't.
You can get an OHV license for it, just like
Yes.
a snowmobile would be required. So,
But
But he also had it parked in the right of way.
that's a different.
Yeah, I mean, there were so many issues. It just stinks. I understand what you're saying because I get it. It stinks for our neighborhood to have that at the front of our neighborhood. And the neighbors won't complain because they don't want to have bad relationships with the neighbors. So then they call the president of the HOA and have to keep that guy. And I don't live anywhere near the guy.
A question. As we addressed parking earlier, does it address the issue of abandoned vehicles or unlicensed vehicles in the right of way?
Something there about towing.
It's probably reasonable for the town to try to control the right of way, but not the private property.
Yeah, definitely. And I will say that inoperable or unlicensed, sailboats can be licensed, a snowmobile or a trailer can be licensed, an RV can be licensed, and this wouldn't even apply to that, so maybe my objection is moot.
But are we writing laws that we don't need to, do we want to control unlicensed inoperable vehicles beyond what the HOAs choose to do?
It's fairly clear what the sample language provided as I reread it, because then it goes into talk about vehicles under repair, which would be an inoperable vehicle, maybe licensed, maybe not. It's very clearly written about people who have 8 or 10 cars up on blocks in their yard for months on end being repaired, and what that does to a neighborhood. The provided sample, I think that's what it was made to address, if I'm reading into it.
Yeah, it's probably confusing with my introductory language where I talk about RVs, trailers, boats. The sample language does not necessarily address these.
I agree with that clarification, and if you split those apart, I can't necessarily object to the sample language. That's all.
Just to chime in, some communities refer to this type of ordinance as a junk vehicle ordinance and put junk included in with it, so it kind of gives a little bit of a descriptor.
I'd be amenable to having that. And the sample language, it's just when the question was more about boats and RVs and that sort of thing. The toys that mountain people tend to have.
And the toys that mountain people have tend to be more than just London Pass Village. You see them along Sutterridge Road and other places as well, parked along the sides of the house. Or the home.
So we're okay with the language language, some tweaks, as long as we make it clear we're dealing with junk vehicles.
And they can't park any of that stuff in the public record.
Yeah.
Is that okay? All right, next,
Okay.
we have lunch, or dinner is sitting out there, probably getting very cold, am I right? I should ask Manny, but, it's getting cold. Yeah, break would be nice. Let's take 15 minutes.
I think it's very important at this workshop that we talk about the housing authority.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, so we'll come back at 6:30, spend a few minutes on the remainder of nuisance, hopefully, and then go into housing authority. Would that be okay? And then if we have time, we'll go back into discussion of formation of boards and commissions,
Potentially skip that.
and then potentially defer that to
Yeah.
the following meeting. All right, we're adjourned until 6:30.
Let's do the housing authority. Sorry, I gotta scroll down a ways here. Okay. At the last Summit County Housing Authority meeting, which I went to with Councilman Davis and Fisted, the board approved sending out an IGA to the various towns that would include Keystone. Kind of want to explain where that is at this moment. Various attorneys are wordsmithing. I've sent out Jennifer's, she got hers done first, out to the other attorneys. Just got one from Breckenridge yesterday, which I haven't sent to Jennifer yet. The wordsmithing on the IGA, although needed, doesn't impact any of the material aspects of the IGA, at least wordsmithing so far. And it sounds like all the jurisdictions are in line with the general material aspects of the IGA. So I will go through the important issues that matter for us. I attached both the original issue and Jennifer's markup to the memo. But there are a few things that the material aspects of the agreement. And so the IGA, and this is actually the third amendment to the second amended IGA or whatever. I will just refer to the amendment as the IGA, which is also attached to it. But the IGA and the new amendment will determine that prior to the beginning of the next fiscal year, every year, the annual operating contribution of each jurisdiction will be determined. That operating contribution will be paid in monthly installments. The operating, or they call it the allocated share. The allocated share is based upon the share of the taxes raised in each jurisdiction. So if Keystone raises 5% of the total taxes in the county, we will pay 5% of the total operating cost and administrative cost of the SCHA. Based on previous year's determination of going back over, figuring out what was Keystone, for this year and fiscal year 2025, Keystone's allocated share will be $5,000 a month. Counties used to be $17,000 a month. That will drop down to $12,000, and our share is $5,000. Breckenridge and Silverthorne are both jumping up in their allocated shares. They've been running off of old numbers for too long, so this is actually kind of a change in the way it'll do, and it'll be adjusted annually to be fair to each town. Money will just be withheld from the monthly distributions. Distribution of funds will not change at all. Monthly distribution of taxes collected in the jurisdiction where the taxes were paid. The SCHA has been withholding, setting aside Keystone's money beginning March 1st. They didn't do it in February. They paid what would have been our share to the county. County paid their full allocated share in February. We're going to work it out with the county to get our share of the money back and pay our share of the allocated funds for February, but rather than hold up the entire process as we, the county, work this out, we just went ahead with the IGAs written. Basically, it recognizes that our membership will begin in February, but it also recognizes that distributions and allocated shares will begin in March.
I would request that, and again, we're a ways away from final approval, but before final make the county aware that we are expecting them to provide that $130,000 to us for in trade with the allocated shares and the 5,000 a month and the 90,000 for start that we'd be participating in. Ought to be, we'd be willing to crank that in, but because the chair of the SBHA committed that we would get our funding from the data corporation.
And we should.
And we should.
Yeah, we should. So I'm working on the county with that right now. It took a while to figure out what the shares were and what the share of the share was from February 8th, but all those calculations have been determined already. So it should not be a problem. Should not be a problem.
And by the way, based on back of the envelope, look at how much some county was paying, what their reduction would be, what our amount would be. It's very fair to us.
Yeah, yeah. And there's one final aspect, a material aspect, and that's a one-time payment. The SCHA just moved into the old Summit Daily building, and each of the jurisdictions contributed $90,000 to that movement. Each of the jurisdictions will get an equal share of the distributions of assets if, for some reason, the SCHA is disbanded. So this 90,000 was not determined by a proportional share like all the other costs and distributions. It's just straight up equal share of everyone involved. Interestingly, because the county has already paid 90,000, this would result in a $90,000 windfall to the SCHA. It's not money they need at this point for the facilities, but it would go into their operating reserve funds at this point for distribution at some point in the future if necessary. The question, I guess, I need from you are there any issues with these three material aspects?
Can I just ask some questions? So the 895,000 we expect per year, is that net?
It's not 895,000 per year, and the actual amount per year after this year is expected to be probably in excess of 1.1 million net.
Okay. So the 895 is this year?
Probably, I would guess probably close to this year.
And is that after the $60,000 we paid?
I do not know the answer to that question.
Again, after the 90,000, that'll probably be in the ballpark, all right? But it's going to depend again on sales tax collections between now and the end of the year.
Yeah, I would assume that the 90,000 was definitely not
Right.
put in any calculations of our budget.
And speaking of the 90,000, was that to acquire the building? I mean, are they buying the building?
And they're leasing it, so it was to acquire the lease and
And renovation.
renovation.
Pretty extensive renovation, furniture.
Okay.
And it's a very nice place.
And I just out of curiosity, I'm sure there's a reason, Montezuma zero?
They don't collect any taxes.
Okay.
Or electric.
But they get distributions?
No, they're just part, as far as I understand, they're part of the IGA that really, they don't need to be.
Okay.
It appears.
That's all I have.
But I guess it would allow them to use the SCHA's facilities if they had any employees. And there are some employees in Montezuma, particularly associated with cannabis grow operations.
Okay, thank you.
In the past, there were businesses up there that collected sales tax.
Yeah.
And they may collect some, but
It's a really
It's a-
minimus
yeah.
amount.
Related to your workforce housing or president tax. But that, you're right, that's part of it,
Yes.
in the sales tax.
Yeah, it's accounted.
The point is and there might be some short-term rentals up there too that contribute,
There definitely are.
but it's really a de minimis amount that varies so greatly year to year that they've never bothered to figure it out in the past. Under the new terms, actually, the way they're going to do it, they're not exempted, they're just exempted through 2025, and then their allocation will be determined based on August through, or September through August of, September of 2024 through August of 2025 will determine the allocations for 2026. So Montezuma would have an allocated share at that point. Who knows what it might be.
Can I add that this facility is used for training purposes for those people interested in buying a house? They do a lot of those kinds of programs. So,
Yeah. So, Montezuma can go to the home buyer education classes, all the educational aspects of the SCHA. It's not simply
a meeting place.
a meeting place and enforcing restrictive covenants.
Okay.
So, once again, next meeting, we'll bring this back, the final lawyer work crafted IGA, and do it once quickly at the workshop and then move to approve at the regular meeting. But if there are concerns about these fundamental aspects, now's the time to bring them up.
does anyone have any concerns?
Well, then we throw it out.
Yep.
Okay, we're close. We are really close.
But we didn't make July 31st,
We're so close.
but we're close.
Well, none of all the other towns are going to be voting in August too. So.
I didn't get the feeling that there was any question
There is not.
from the others. It's just
Matter what.
it makes sense for us to be part of this.
I've talked to a couple of the town managers and there's no resistance at all. It's just a matter of going through the IGA and getting everything formally approved through a resolution with the council. All right, next item then, let's go back to discussion of ordinance and formation of boards and commissions. And we have about 10 minutes. So I'll turn it over to the town manager.
Okay, we'll see what we can get done here. We'll move right on to camping. And this would be, camping already will not be allowed on public right-of-ways, properties. That's under all sorts of issues, but
Or nuisance or?
Or
nuisance.
Still a nuisance. All right.
So,
I actually saw a tent down by the ponds on West Keystone Road.
oh, Marty.
Aww. I hope it was little kids with their sleeping bags and fishing poles.
And upon hearing that, community development director walked out of the room. Go ahead.
But is there, as a council, do you want to limit on parking on private property?
Parking or camping?
Camping, not parking, camping on private property. Understanding in many ways this is very difficult to enforce in RVs. Parking your driveway, is someone staying in there or not? And there should be, it's my opinion at least, there probably should be some level of camping permitted. Your brother-in-law comes and visits you and wants to stay in his RV for a couple days. It's not necessarily the end of the world. Someone camping for a summer might be.
Councilmember Davis?
We don't allow it
Yep.
I
on our
think
property.
the hazard you see is all the time on one man's junk, and there's several other Facebook groups where people look around and people are always asking, where can I set up my camper van a couple nights? Where can I set up my camper van a month? Where can I camp for the season? Any and all the above, and I'll pay you. And universally in this county, the answer is you cannot do that on anyone's property. Go look at a different county. I don't know if we want to be the exception to that. If we wanted to make an exception of that, it ought to be only the property owner who can do it. Like, if you want to test out the RV you just bought for a night, who cares?
Yeah.
But I don't know about letting Uncle John stay in your side yard for a month. What do you guys think?
We're talking about private property.
Yeah. I mean, I saw an STR had a camper van for a week. People were living in the driveway. It allows them to put even more people on the property.
And it's a health and safety issue, and sanitation issue.
I think we need to have some recourse for enforcement when things like that pop up.
Consensus is yes.
Yes.
Noxious and dangerous liquid storage of such things is pretty much a no-brainer. There's lots of, once again, every single town, as far as I know, has something like this in their nuisance code. And it's just, you don't want someone storing barrels of oil and things that can present a real serious health hazard if something goes wrong.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes, we don't
Yep.
have it.
Jake breaks are addressed in our parking, so there's no need to put that in nuisance, I feel. Unless you like it both places.
We talked about putting it both places and giving latitude on enforcement of sound camera catches under nuisance code.
As opposed to the criminal code.
Right.
So I'll mirror the language from our traffic code. For
Everyone okay?
compression brakes.
We said for emergency though, that kind of stuff is fine.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Do we need to define what an emergency is, or can anyone just say every time they use to take breaks, oh, my brakes were out, it's an emergency? Is that going to be the response to every citation?
Good question.
I think emergency should be defined and who is involved in the emergency, you know? I mean, yeah, I'm sorry, it should be defined as to what it means.
Didn't Dylan define it in the code?
Well, I'm just trying to see if it's defined in
I don't
this.
think I've seen it, so.
I think it's defined here. So it's authorized emergency vehicles. It's not related to the driver.
Got it. I think that's fair because they're going to use it in emergency anyway, but they still own the responsibility and there's discretion by the court.
Yeah, if it's a true emergency, I'm sure the court would.
If the fire department then responded because they were on fire, that's,
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, noxious weeds and rank vegetation.
Rank vegetation.
Yeah, I do too. This basically, and this is a big question. Okay, noxious weeds are an easy, a no-brainer, in my opinion. Do we want to deal with rank vegetation?
What is that?
That means just basically uncontrolled growth of grass, trees, shrubbery, but there are people going natural
Right.
yards, which,
Councilmember Davis?
Given this is a wildfire zone, given this is a wildfire zone, I think we need to be careful about the rank vegetation.
I think there's a difference between fire hazard, wildland fire hazard, and what usually gets determined to be rank vegetation under town nuisance codes, which tends to be more appearance.
we don't have, I don't think we do have wild fire hazards that we discussed last week to an extent.
I don't know the lawnmower, and I'm not buying one.
Yeah.
I can't see my neighbors going in there.
But, yeah, I think rank vegetation could be, we will control along with the fire department hazardous situations. But generally, rank vegetation is meant you haven't mowed your yard and all your neighbors are upset at you.
Well,
That's
so,
what HOA covers.
I think it is an HOA.
Yeah.
and
There's one guy in Loveland Pass Village who knows it's long.
So take out rank vegetation.
Okay.
I'll be back to say it at least 5 times.
Okay, we're flying through these. So panhandling. Now, there are issues with adding panhandling because First Amendment rights. You can, however, limit panhandling in certain areas as a nuisance, and my thought is on the Highway 6 right-of-way, there's a panhandling could present a real hazard.
Where can't we restrict it for First Amendment rights?
Unless there's and our attorney probably correct me, but my understanding is you can't restrict it unless there's truly a health and safety issue to restrict.
That explains what's happening, remember?
Yeah.
Hey,
If you're going to put something in there and we're going to restrict it on the Highway 6 right away, I would argue there's a safety issue if there were panhandlers at Gondola Road and Montezuma Road.
yes, Aaron, yes!
Or the Four Corners.
Or could you simply say, there's no panhandling along US 6? in Keystone,
But that doesn't,
including
yeah,
Gondola Road, because of that's the major thoroughfare in,
Montezuma.
into Montezuma Road. That would allow them, if they wanted to panhandle on Montezuma further down.
Near his house.
Yeah. But it,
Yeah.
I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, Madam Attorney, we have limitations except for the safety issues that you're talking about on restricting panhandling on public property. On private property, that's controlled by the owner of that property.
Yes.
So like in River Run Village, the HOV Vail Resorts or the Keystone Neighborhood Company would be the ones who would be controlling the panhandling in there, not the town.
Are lemonade stands considered panhandling?
No. The question is whether.
Do they have to be
And we just don't say it.
Yeah, some things,
You don't want to go there.
depends on how much you're charging the
I
glass.
haven't really figured
Yeah. All right. Is that enough on panhandling for you?
I want to look at it too.
Yeah.
I mean, I haven't worked on a regulation with the municipality related to panhandling, but there are very strong First Amendment rights that apply to it. One thing you can do related to private property is, and it is probably already spelled out in our land use code, is signs. You can regulate signs on private property, and that's size of signs, all of that, not the content, but size.
Of the homemade signs that the panhandlers bring?
Well, so that's I mean, we're talking about putting a sign on private property. Yes. I heard some discussion about signs related to,
Parking.
no, more like lemonade stands, those types of things. A lemonade stand would be a temporary sign, which is probably permitted under the land use code, if it's under a certain size.
Yeah, but I'm gonna take some of those proceeds for the sign permit.
Okay. Yeah, so,
And I also had discharge into waterways, but I'm thinking we should put that in our development code rather than the nuisance code. Because there are so many, there's a lot of different points about discharge into waterways.
Does that include like hot tub drainage and things when people drain their hot tubs?
Yes. It will.
I don't even know.
Anything else? Are we ready for another draft? It is now 7 o'clock, and we are ready to adjourn this meeting, go on to the next. I would propose, I probably need a motion for this, to defer the discussion of ordinance or formation of boards and commissions to the next meeting.
you don't need a motion.
All right.
It's informal work session,
All right.
and you can just provide direction to staff to bring it back at a future meeting.
Bring it back at a future meeting. And with that, I would ask for a motion to adjourn. Any discussion of manager council issues we'll discuss in the, at the council meeting.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor, raise your hands. Motion is passed by a vote of 6-0. All right, we're adjourned.